And welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. See if I can play from the start. I hope you're all seeing that. Are you all seeing my screen? I'm just going to assume you are, and I hope you are. So CSI Rivers and River Life, and that's the name of my PhD project. Well, CSI Rivers is my PhD project, and I'm just going to be talking to you a little bit today about that project, the value of rivers, some of the pressures that our rivers are facing, management considerations, the importance of a healthy river, how we can help with citizen science, the multiple benefits of assisting and helping our rivers, and nature-based citizen science. And then there's going to be just a very brief, simple polls. I'm just curious to see how you would all answer, and how involved you might be in citizen science and nature related activities. So we begin with CSI Rivers. So for those of you who thought it was crime scene investigation, sorry to disappoint, it's citizen science investigations, river environmental stewardship. So when we're talking citizen science, citizen science has been going on for thousands of years. While it may not have been called citizen science, it would have started from monks recording the weather over thousands of years, or vineyards recording the date of French vineyards recording the date of the harvesting of their grapes. When were they most ripe? When were they ready? The Japanese cherry blossom festival. When were they at their peak of blossoming? And that was the sign of spring. And so over generations, over many thousands of years, they're able to determine trends. So citizen science is someone took those records and compared, and they saw trends, and they were able to see, oh, you know, we noticed that they harvested early and they ripened early, and the cherry blossom festival, they reached their peak earlier than they have in 1200 years this year. And we're seeing, oh, this could be related to climate change. It could be the warming climate. It could be related to that. So we're able to use data from non-scientists to inform management and to inform scientific research. So we're not doing it through temporal, although we are. there are scientific research doing data analysis of monitoring and water conditions and aspects like that. So the way we're using citizen science is more a spatial aspect. We're looking at all the different spaces. So we're trying to get a snapshot of monitoring. And so it's members of the public, just like us, non-scientists, going out and collecting scientific data. And it's extremely useful because scientists can't be everywhere all the time. They can't access all these places. So it's really filling in gaps, and citizen science really has a lot of potential. And I'll go through some of the benefits and some of the data that we can get from it, and also some of the methods of citizen science, and particularly when it has to do with monitoring for water quality. So my project is Citizen Science Investigations, River Environmental Stewardship, and that is actors and the actions, numerous stakeholders, all different interests for whatever reasons, but we're all going to care for the river in some way or other. And that's how citizen science is going to, and that's where citizen science comes in. So it's partially funded by the EPA and MARI and UL, and these are my supervisors' names. And it's also working in partnership with LawPro and Meg Rivers Trust. So my study, a lot of my research is being conducted at the Meg River, which is in County Limerick, and the whole catchment area. And we're talking a little bit about catchments later. So the value of rivers, the value of freshwater, our beautiful blue planet, 70% of which is covered in water. This is great. Water is very valuable. Unfortunately, only about 2.5% of it is actually freshwater. And of that, 1.2% is actually accessible to us. The rest is in ice caps and permafrost and glaciers and very deep underground. So we can't even access freshwater, most of the freshwater on this earth. And then of that, how much of that is actually unpolluted at this stage? So thousands have lived without love, unfortunately, but not a one without water. And that's not my words. These are W.H. Auden, British poet. So the value of rivers, clearly we need to drink water. Humans can't survive without drinking water for 3 days. They need water, they need liquids. and salt water doesn't do it. We've been using water, we've been using rivers for drinking water, we've been bathing. Imagine, even with COVID, the spread of diseases, we wash our hands all the time. Imagine if we weren't able to cleanse our hands. And civilizations have developed and grown due to rivers. Our heritage is intrinsically tied to rivers. We've watered our crops with agriculture. We've hydrated our cattle. They're natural borders for us. They serve as food. Fish, water birds, and other animals need to drink water as well. So we knew that if we just hung about the water, eventually the deer would come. So it eased our hunting abilities. We've used them for navigation. We've generated power, hydropower from rivers. Recreational activities, aesthetic beauty, spiritual beauty, and they do all these other services as well that we just take for granted. They drain the land, they collect the water and put it in a certain place, they move, they constantly flow. They're a major essential part of the hydrological system. So they carry water and nutrients. Nutrients are essential aspects, and they help us shift those around as well. And they serve as wildlife habitats. They're essential. So humans, being as ingenious as we are, we're very industrious, and we know how to maximize the benefits that we can reap from everything. So we have gone about taming our wild rivers. We have channelized them. We've created canals. We've deepened them. We've widened them. There's a natural flow that they would normally do. We've straightened them out. We've used them to generate power. We've built these massive dams to divert water, to collect, so we have a regular source of water. We've used it for wastewater, to wash away our wastewater, land and road drainage. We've controlled the flow, we've controlled our sources, we've piped in water, we've built dams and weirs, we've done maintenance work, we've put hard embankments, maintenance work to prevent flooding. So all these hard embankments, they need regular maintenance. So we've disturbed loads of things, we've dredged channels, we just scraped the bottoms, and we've scraped all that substrate, and we've destroyed loads of different aspects. So we've really interfered with this wild river, and we've tried hard to tame these natural wild rivers. And again, as civilizations have grown, we've continued to develop right around rivers. We need this resource. So we've continued to develop, we've continued to build cities. We seal all the surfaces so the water has nowhere to go. We're not letting the land absorb the water. We're just rushing it right into the rivers. We're maximizing its potential to wash away all of our terrestrial areas. So agriculture has continued to intensify, forestry has grown. So there's a lot of pressures, a lot of attempt to really tame this wild river, and it is essential. But what we're left with are troubled waters. We have pollution in form of many different types of chemicals, heavy metals, toxins, fertilizers, nutrients in the form of fertilizers. We have pesticides and herbicides, actual big litter, big plastic bits, loads of different types of litter, even microplastics. A lot of you are interested in beach plastics. A lot of that comes from rivers. It's just going to naturally flow and push away all of that litter, and it would wash in from the land. Down the river it goes. Sedimentation creates massive issues. Over nutrification, the eutrophication, too many nutrients, causes excess amount of algal growth, and that just clogs things up, and then you end up with microorganisms working too much and they use up all the oxygen. Sedimentation interferes with the gills of fish. It makes water look cloudy, so it doesn't let light through. Loads of different aspects and cascading impacts from different pollutants, different types of interference. Alien invasives, by disturbing land, we're letting alien invasives come in and spread. They spread waterways, they carry seeds, they carry things across. We allow them to spread. We've changed the flow, we've changed the levels, we've altered the temperatures. We've increased the potential of economic flood damage by building our cities right in floodplains. Of course, when we're forcing all this water in, of course, downstream, there's going to be more water and it's going to be faster moving, and there's more economic destruction and damage from flooding. We've created barriers to wildlife migration. Migratory fish cannot pass a lot of these barriers. We've disturbed the movements. A lot of otters are forced onto roads because we built culverts in high water areas. They can't access their halts where they would normally survive, and so they're forced onto roads. We've destroyed habitats, so that substrate that I was talking about, numerous different habitats, and these are just destroyed by the dredging and the scraping of the bottoms, and we've destroyed the banks, those riparian zones, that area. We'll be talking a little bit more about that. And of course, with all of these things, by destroying the habitats and those areas where these animals can survive, of course, they're not going to be able to survive, so that we're going to end up with biodiversity loss. And then, of course, climate change is happening. So all of these things just exacerbating. So we're really devaluing all of those benefits that rivers have evolved us. They've given us the ability to evolve to what we are. And we're devaluing. We're not, it's not as, I wouldn't drink river water now. I'd wash my hands from putting my hands in a river. So it's like all of these little things, all of these benefits that made them so valuable to us, and we're devaluing a very essential asset. So how do we balance, and how do we find the balance and scale? So when we're talking scale, so yeah, we do have to find the balance because of all these pressures, all of these needs, all of these stakeholders. So much depends on a healthy river. So we have a river water quality is in decline in Ireland. And this is despite there's a natural resilience to rivers. We have a lot of rainfall in Ireland. So you'd think, oh, this is, it dilutes it. And yet with all of these aspects, that actual natural movement and that way to repair itself, they're still in decline. We have numerous legislations, management plans, state bodies, non-government organizations, community groups, interest groups, and yet still in decline. So this is where we need to find a balance. We need to find how to manage at the right scale. So we have a lot of this legislation, and this is top down, all these laws, all these restrictions, all of these aspects, and it's not working. So part of my PhD is looking into this catchment here. So when I'm talking scale, I'm not talking scale so much, talking about the scale. Is it little micro scale? So, and also the larger scale. So when we're looking at a river, and I was telling you how it's like it's just this wild thing. And it's not just like one little stretch of a river, like you see behind me in this photo. That's just a little snapshot of a tiny area. But when we look at a catchment, when we look at the whole area, so this is the area that my PhD is based in. It's this little tiny red bit here, and this is here a little bit more magnified. And every little single stretch here, this here is the beginnings of a stream. And every single aspect that I'm looking at here, so this stream will run into this stream, and then they would gather here, and then they would go to Luba over here, and then this might flow downstream in this direction. And every little part that you're looking at has a different nature, has a different character. Each section is unique. Not only is it unique in the way that some are steeper than others, some are faster moving, they'll have different chemistries, different vegetation on their side. And I'm talking naturally, I'm not even talking what humans have done, but even naturally, this would be cooler, perhaps there would be different substrate because the water is so forceful that it's forcing all the smaller bits downstream. So here you might have larger boulders, and all of those unique characters of all these different stretches of river. This one here might be wider and deeper, it might be slower moving. And then as we get here, it's even more slower, more wide, more deep, a little more turbid, a little more sedimentation, finer areas, finer grains, less clear, different temperatures, different chemistries. And when we're looking here, every single aspect of land that is drained here has a different different stakeholder, different interests, different landowners, some are farms, some are industry, all these different aspects. So every little stretch is unique naturally. And then humans have come in and completely diverse and every little aspect here. And when I'm looking here and you say it's the drainage, it's the catchment, it's a drainage basin, I can assume that these don't exist. These begin here because there's an elevation. When we look at the Lee Valley here, all these little triangles, see, and this one might flow in this direction here. All of these will flow, and it's, gravity is working. So here, these little triangles, you can see that that's elevation. So here, these waters would be draining down in this direction. And then again, I'm looking here at all these different land uses and all of these different unique dynamic aspects, and it is complex. And so when we're looking to manage water quality, we have to look at the big picture and the entire catchment and all those different influences, all of those different stakeholders, and how we know that there's going to be a natural change, natural movement from rivers, and they naturally want to move, they adapt themselves. So they're fighting back our attempt to tame. They do fight back, thus flooding, thus numerous other issues. But we have to take into account the dynamic, unique, complex nature of rivers, but also how they integrate with humanity. And because they're a part of us and our survival depends upon all that fresh water and accessing it. So numerous stakeholders, and that's part of that diversity. It's part of what we need to consider, and we need to find the right balance. So we have the top-down management, and then we have the bottom-up, and that's where we come in as citizen scientists. This is where we can come in and actually make a difference, because we're the ones. It's you and me who live in all these little parts here. It's you and me that have access to all of these little streams, and the government, the state agencies, the EPA doesn't have access to our backyards. They can't tell us what's happening back here. They'll have their own meters, they'll have numerous testing, but that's where citizen science can really benefit by providing a bigger spatial picture on the water quality in the whole catchment. So if we were all involved taking readings and monitoring the water quality, then we can really know what management areas need more attention. And so I'm going to say this word frequently, diversity. And diversity, when it comes to biodiversity, is in numerous different types of species of life, because we all know the food web. We all know everything depends upon everything else for survival. So we want diversity we want all those different unique areas. We don't want to make everything the same because we'd be killing off numerous species. So when we're looking at that catchment, we're also looking at not just the water, but what's happening at the side of those water, the side of every single river, stream. And we want to think about that interface between the terrestrial area and the aquatic area. And this is the riparian zone. It's the riparian, it's that interface, and it's that green artery. Look at all that photosynthesis going on. Look at all of this. Look at all that oxygen. So it's like, we want this, but also we want it because it's a buffer zone. It buffers all of those activities that are happening on the land surrounding them. So by being here, by really blanketing and sort of acting as a cover to our waterways, they're intercepting water. They're not just flushing water downstream, they're actually capturing some of that water. So it isn't just going to the next town at rapid pace. We're actually slowing it down. You might have heard slow the flow. That's what it means. It's a lot of this riparian zone bog areas. They all have this advantage of being able to intercept some of that water and keeping it where it benefits you and for later, and then also preventing it from going just straight downhill. It'll capture those nutrients so it doesn't over nutrify the water, so it doesn't just all get into that water and cause that over excess algal growth and things like that. It can trap sediment. I was saying how sediment can interfere with the gills of fish and cause numerous other aspects and problems as well. It can stabilize those banks so they don't again rush downhill. Farmers don't want their lands to rush downhill with the first flood or the first rainstorm. So the root systems hold on to that soil, and they stabilize the banks. They control water temperature by adding shading here. They're keeping the water cool. So they're preventing sun, so shade is cool, and And salmonids, which like salmon and trout, they need cool, highly oxygenated water. And I was saying how over sedimentation, over nutrients, it uses too much oxygen up, and then fish still need oxygen. They just breathe it in through their gills, and it's a dissolved oxygen that's in the water. So, and they need cooler temperatures as well, and cooler waters hold more oxygen. So this shading, this little dappled effect by just blocking just that little bit of shade from the sun also really helps to protect wildlife. And they act as wildlife habitats and refuges the same way hedgerows. You want to connect these things because then they can just transport. They don't have to go onto roads. You want to make sure that they're all connected, and then they can be those refuges for wildlife. So that's the riparian zone, an absolutely essential part of a river, as much as it doesn't seem a part of it. But then let's talk about the river. So here we have a fish, and this is a lovely little brown trout. And we see that there's insects. They need each other. What do they eat? Insects. So we know that fish are essential wildlife habitats. And I was just talking about salmon and fish. They need cooler temperatures, cooler water temperatures. When it gets overly warm, they don't thrive. They need highly oxygenated. You've heard of fish kills, pollutants. Something has happened in that water they're quite sensitive. So if they couldn't move, if they couldn't relocate, then they would have died. You've heard of fish kills. There are different reasons for fish kills as well. We have the water bat, very much happy little insect eaters. And a lot of the insects that you see, which we'll talk about in a second, start their lives in the water. So there is a very close relationship. This is the Daubenton's bat, it's the water bat. And often you will not see them, might hear them with the reader. And I actually used to see them. You stand on a bridge and hold your flashlight, and then the flashlight attracts the moths or other insects, and then often you'll see the bat chasing them off. And so I can see them, but I've never been able to snap a shot like this. So that's pretty fantastic picture. We love our birds, a lot of water birds. These will eat insects as well, but they'll also eat fish. So there's that ecosystem, there's that food web, there's that food chain where everything's dependent. And really, when you think about it, we need those insects, right? So I keep talking about insects, but I'll tell you why in a second. So here we have this kingfisher, and you see how he's perched. They're very commonly seen perched in a riparian zone, hanging over the water, looking down and hunting. So they need that riparian zone as well. Dippers, they love to do their hunting right alongside the river. Herons, swallows, all of these water birds, they rely on the water. And of course, otters. I know, Jill, you were saying, I love your photos, by the way. So the young river otter here, and again, part of that massive food chain, 95% of their resting places are in those riparian zones. So we can't destroy them. We have to let them, and they very much depend on these fish, and these fish very much depend on those insects. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about those insects because they're essential. They really are. I always say invertebrates. So macroinvertebrates is what you'll often hear them referred to. So macroinvertebrates are those insects, and aquatic macroinvertebrates are in the water. So I always say, as much as invertebrates may not have backbones, they are the backbone to this food web and to many food webs. So we need those insects. So we have this beautiful demoiselle damselfly. Now, I didn't name it, but I can see why it got its name. That's its common name. So these guys, you might have seen them. They're stunning. They use very much the riparian zone. When they are adults, well, dragonflies and damselflies, and when I say diversity, there are many different species, and many different species of insects need a diversity of habitats, and they have different needs and different life cycles. So we're talking about a damselfly or dragonfly and numerous other insects, but this particular damselflies in general, they will lay their eggs in either just beside the river on a stalk that's on some sort of vegetation that's half in, half out. So either in the river, just at the side of the river, inside, and then the eggs develop into these stunning little nymphs. And these guys live a good few years, 2 maybe, and like I said, different species have different lengths of time that they live in their larval or nymph form. And they very much depend, again, on oxygenated water. And I was talking to you about the catchment. There's faster flowing waters, there's slower flowing waters. Different species of insects require different temperatures. Some are more tolerant of low oxygen conditions, some are more tolerant, some are very sensitive, some need very good oxygen, some need fast moving waters, some need cooler water, all different types of aspects. So talking about diversity again. Oh, and so when these guys become adults, what do they do again? So when their last molt, they climb up again that riparian vegetation, and then they stretch out their wings, and then so it's back to the air again. So they have very closely, they also do a lot of their courting in that riparian zone, and they are quite stunning. So yeah, they flutter like butterflies. Anyway, so we have these guys, and they're completely dependent on that water and that water quality. And so when we're talking about diversity, there are some that are weed dwellers, some like to burrow in the mud, in the sand, some have very specific floral needs, some they flatten themselves out and grip onto their stones. A lot of creatures need a gravel substrate. Fish spawning is essential. They need that gravel, bits of sand, bits of gravel. Reds for lampreys, freshwater pearl mussels are critically endangered species, and there's a very close relationship to salmonid fish. They need part of their life, they live part of their lifespan in the gills. So they're all very dependent on the very structure, which is clean water. So we're talking otters, our birds, all those things we love are dependent on clean water and a diversity of different habitat types and riparian zones. So I have a particular love for this type of insect. This is a cased caddis. These little guys, their way of, there's thousands of different species in the world, and some of them build cases, and some of them don't. And they use in their salivary glands, they silk gland, and they pick particles. Some use vegetation, and some use like shiny bits, some use, and they're real architects, and they build these little cases themselves. And different species will choose different materials. So this one here has chosen like a little bit larger, maybe to weigh themselves down. Maybe these guys have a preference for faster water, so they're like, oh, I need to bulk myself out. Maybe to protect themselves from predators such as this little eater, this little carnivore here. And this is similar to what this is. Caddisflies adults eventually look like this. And these are what you've probably seen, thought they're moths. And this is a very important part of that food chain. Most fly at night, some during the day. Again, different species, different life cycles, different lifestyles. So here we have this cased caddis. And just as a matter of interest, this is a French artist who captures some cased caddis larvae, and he just puts in little valuable gems, pearls, gold, and he lets them do his artwork for him. And he's put his name, but I think it should have its species name, but that's just a preface. So citizen science, and this, I've been talking about bugs a lot, and there's a reason why I've been talking about insects a lot. Lots of different types of citizen science, and there's a lot of different types of opportunities you can get involved in depending on what interests you. So this here is a tray. The citizen science that is sort of the standard in like the EPA and what scientists will do, and it gives you a really good picture because there are so many different species of insect, and because some are very tolerant of really poor conditions, like very little oxygen in that water, don't need to see anything, talking leeches and bloodworms, all these different little ones. They're very tolerant. They're such hardy dudes that they can survive almost anything. So if you take a sampling and you see a whole lot of these really tolerant ones, and then you don't see any of the really sensitive ones we were talking about, I haven't mentioned mayflies or stoneflies, and if you do a sampling and you don't get any of those, but you get lots of those really tolerant ones, then that's an indicator for you. That's an indicator that there's a problem. There's something upstream that's creating an issue, and nothing can survive. None of the sensitive species can survive here. But if you're finding lovely, very sensitive creatures there, if you're finding some of these stoneflies that are very sensitive, then that is an indication that these guys can survive there. Then you know, this is good water. This is quality. It's clean water, relatively clean water. There's no problem with oxygenation. So here's just a tray. It looks like nothing, but what you do, so when you're learning, you learn about, so some are more tolerant than others, as I was saying. So what you learn about is, you would learn how to take a sample and how to count. Like here, there's a few little mayflies, and you would count the different species. Here we have a lovely big crayfish. So, and you would learn health and safety, not just health and safety. You'd learn very much health and safety for getting into the river, because you would be wearing Wellingtons. And you would absolutely never get into the river. You learn the conditions in which you do not ever get into the river, because it can be very dangerous. So health and safety, when to get into the river and when not to. And also health and safety so that you don't spread invasive species, and also health and safety so that you don't spread, this here is two of our citizen science, and they're sanitizing their Wellingtons, because these poor little crayfish are suffering a plague in many of our Irish rivers. So this is so that we don't cause more problems than our poor river systems already have to face. And then you take a sampling. We show you the sampling techniques, where these critters survive. And then you just take a sampling, and then, so here's just inspecting a tray, and then you learn how to identify some of the key macroinvertebrates, some of the key insects that you're finding, and then how to record and count the data to analyze it a little bit and to tell you about the quality of the water. You might notice other things as well, other macroinvertebrates, fish kills. You don't even need to get into the water. You see that, you know that there's a problem. Alien invasive species, problem. Crayfish plague, you'd be seeing dead crayfish. Algal blooms, I was talking about eutrophication, over-nutrified waters. So these are all different aspects that citizen science can contribute data. So for those of you who don't want to get into the river, for those of you who like, maybe you need to work up to it, which is absolutely perfect, there are other ways that you can also really fill in gaps to knowledge. National Biodiversity Data Center is always happy to hear of different species. Here is just a casual sighting. So different ways you can get involved in nature-based citizen science and make a difference and fill in those gaps of science, so you get that spatial picture of how nature is surviving throughout Ireland. You don't necessarily even need to be by a river. You could do this anywhere. So casual sightings, chance sightings of a riverside walk. So red conservation status, highest priority, needing urgent action for this great wagtail. We see them in Ireland, but Europe-wide, these are actually red conservation status. So very interesting information. And I'm sure the National Biodiversity Center could do that. You just take a snapshot and you input it online. Very simple to do it. For those of you who want to, say, adopt a stream, there's different types of citizen science where you adopt a certain area, and you just regularly walk that path, and you during certain seasons, and you would count whatever species you're interested in. For those of you who love, you might have done it with birds, bees, butterflies, and for those of you who love bees, bees are very attracted to willow trees, and willow trees absolutely thrive beside rivers. So you can do your riverside walks and count your bees and bumblebees or whatever it is you want. For those of you who want to collect, just would rather stand at the side of a river, you can, this is a stock photo, this is not Ireland. You would actually stand either at the side of the river or even on a bridge, and you would tie a string, you would tie a jar or a bottle to a string, and you would just collect some water, and then you would take some chemical samplings. You don't need to get into the river for this. You just stand to the side of it, you collect some water, and then you get it, we'd provide you with a kit. And then you would compare it with a color sample, because there's a little agent. So there's different ways of getting involved in that way as well. And then of course, I was talking about the in-stream works, macroinvertebrates and Wellingtons, where you would go in there and you would actually get yourself a sampling of some of those macroinvertebrates. And then for those of you who would rather just get stuck right in doing lots of different activities, again, this is not in Ireland, this is a stock photo. You can actually do restoration works, removal of invasive species, something like that. And there's just different ways of getting involved. So the benefits of citizen science and the nature-based citizen science are numerous. All of these things, and they can be of benefit to society, the environment, and the economy, believe it or not. The data will inform management. It will help wildlife. It'll be indicating that there's a problem, or that there isn't a problem. So we need to just, whatever is going on well here, we need to sort of replicate this elsewhere. And we need to make sure we protect it. Awareness makes you protect your natural heritage and community. When you're aware how much we have developed from that, it'll increase the resilience for the future and sustainability. So also for the future, for our children, grandchildren. So by having that biodiversity and diversity of habitats, diversity of species, allowing all those intricate webs to hold on to each other, to hold on and work together, and allowing all that complexity, that builds resilience. If you lose one species, it's okay. But when you lose everything, and it's a very simple structure, you're going to lose it all. It's all going to go. If we lost the insects, if we lost the habitats that let those insects thrive, we would eventually start to lose our birds. They would have to find somewhere else to go. We would lose our otters. They wouldn't have a food supply. So we need to make sure to protect the backbone of that ecosystem. And it'll reconnect us to nature. And there are numerous studies, I can't even tell you how many there are, that blue and green space will actually help us. So by getting out into nature, it will lower our blood pressure, it'll boost our immune system, it'll decrease our stress hormone. There are so many benefits to us: pain, mental health, emotional health, improves our memory. I could go on. I could go on when it comes to the health benefits for us. I'm not even talking exercise. So Heraclitus, over 2,500 years ago, no person ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and they are not the same person. Adapted from Heraclitus, he said man, so I couldn't allow that. And it's true, like by spending time, you start to get a new perspective on life. And the river, as I was saying, it's never the same river. It is so dynamic, and you can't tame it. So I just wanted to thank you all for being here. There is a survey. I'd love to hear your opinions. I want to know how you feel about your rivers, what matters to you about your river, your local river. And if you focused your cameras on this, a little pop-up should come up, and it would say Qualtrics survey. It would just take you to this link here. Feel free to fill in that survey. It take about 12 minutes. It's completely anonymous. Don't need to take it at all. It's completely confidential. I don't know who it is. And I just ask you questions just based on your concerns, what you think about, what bothers you about things. So I just wanted to thank you, and I'd be happy to take questions, but there's also a little poll, if that's okay. And the first question, the other ones are quite easy questions, but this one here is, what type of river-based citizen science would most interest you? Now, we were just talking about the river sidewalk, and this was the one I just wanted you to, before you voted, which would most interest you? Do you really see yourself doing, and you could potentially be more curious about? So just the river sidewalk would just be taking casual sightings. This doesn't need to be a riverside. It could be anywhere. It could be in your backyard. You could adopt a stretch, just walking along anywhere and contributing regularly to whatever, counting the number of species you see. So here's the poll has popped up. Thank you, Atheria. The poll has popped up there. Adopt a stretch where you would regularly count species on whatever chosen stretch you want, working beside the river, similar to here, but with jars. You wouldn't be collecting macroinvertebrates. You'd just be collecting a bit of water, and you'd be testing how clear it is and the chemicals. You'd have a kit, and you'd be testing the chemicals with that kit. Or the in river, the actual getting in there and getting that the high standard, sampling macroinvertebrates wearing the Wellingtons, Or are you the type who likes to get your hands good and dirty? River restoration and cleanup, none of the above or all of the above? I would love to hear your opinion on that one. And I think I'll vote myself. So, thank you for that, Eleutheria. I'll give you a few seconds. Oh, have I moved too soon? Oh, thank you for that. I think you'll all hear me take a snapshot because I'm really curious to see what you answered. Thank you for that. Brilliant. Right. So
Everyone can see the results.
yeah, oh, that's great. I love that like 46% of you are interested in all of the above. It warms my heart. Thank you for that. Brilliant. Thank you for that. So these are much easier. You don't have to, these are just, what do you currently do? Do you ever photograph wildlife? Yes, regularly. Yes, sometimes. No, but I always want to. Yeah, I'd like to, or just never. I think. And I'm going to take the poll myself as well. I just want to show off that this is one of the few pictures that I have taken. I know most of them we saw were by Liz or stock photos, but this is one that I have actually taken. Ah, fantastic. So of those, so no, but I would like to. I hope this has maybe inspired you a little bit too, because for those of you who already take photos of wildlife, imagine the resource that you have sitting in your phone for the National Biodiversity Data Center or biology.ie or for any one of those sites. They would really want to know what you've seen. So just think about like potentially submitting some of that data. It's valuable. So did you or do you participate in, have you ever in the past, or do you now participate in citizen science? And here's just National Biodiversity Data Center. There's many different ways to contribute, numerous different species as well. Coast Watch Survey is citizen science as well. Irish Garden Bird Survey, Birdwatch Ireland has a lot of different citizen science. I know Jill has requested records if anyone has any ladybirds. That's citizen science. All very useful information. Oh, great. I'm preaching to the converted here. This is great. Fantastic. Okay. I'm just, oh, I lost that photo. Okay. And just very simple last one. Do you plan to participate in citizen science in the future? And when I say that, I'm like, do you think you might do more of the water quality citizen science? Might that interest you? So do you plan to participate in citizen science in the future? Yay, thank you all so much. Fantastic, I'm thrilled. I'm really thrilled, thank you all. So that really is me. Here's this again, but I'm gonna stop sharing now to give others an opportunity. I know that there's, we can get through questions if anyone has any.